Okay, so we're going to start week 3 talking about the endocrine system. And actually, that's what we're going to talk about all week. I'm going to treat this a little bit differently than I have in the past, whereas a lot of times the endocrine system gets into memorization, right? This is a hormone, this is a stimulus, this is where it's released from, this is its target. But I'm not going to do that this semester, so I'm going to focus on kind of some of the processes. They're more interesting and I think easier to remember anyway. So we're going to start with carbohydrate metabolism. So we're going to talk about plasma glucose, and we're going to talk about glucose uptake, so getting glucose into the cell, in both cases at rest and at exercise. So this figure is right out of your book. So this figure identifies the 4 hormones that are involved with blood glucose, and especially during exercise. So we've got epi, norepi, glucagon, and cortisol, and then we've got our glucose concentration. So if you look at this, as we exercise over the course of actually up to 3 hours, our glucose levels actually remain pretty consistent, and it's due to the interplay of the 4 different hormones. Now, remember, we need glucose to produce ATP. Okay, it's kind of the main thing that we use. One of the main things we use. Obviously, we use fat as well, but we use glucose. Remember, glucose, we're able to use it or generate ATP more quickly. But it's important that we maintain blood glucose, and we'll get into this later in the semester. We don't want blood glucose to be too high or too low, especially at the beginning of exercise. Having high blood glucose at the start of exercise will actually cause our glucose levels to tank because of gradients. Okay, so we have a big gradient, which means it's really easy for glucose to go from the bloodstream into the cell. So when we're maintaining blood glucose, we're using glucagon, cortisol, epi, and norepi. So glucagon, just a reminder, the stimulus is if blood glucose gets lower than normal, released by the pancreas, targets fat and liver. And what it does is it stimulates something called glycogenolysis. Okay, lysis, as we talked about, is the breakdown of something. So we're talking about the breakdown of glycogen. Remember, glycogen is a storage form of glucose. Basically, it's a whole bunch of glucose molecules stuck together, kind of as indicated here by this X. All right, and so what happens is with glycogenolysis, we break each of those glucose molecules off into individual molecules, and then those can go in the bloodstream, and then we're able to absorb them. Okay. And there's also this process called gluconeogenesis, and glucagon helps with this as well. And so instead of breaking glycogen down to form glucose, what we're doing is we're taking other products, in this case, generally it's protein, to produce glucose molecules. And we're not getting into the specific steps or what we start with, that sort of thing. But it's also important to know that we can use protein to form glucose when we need it. Okay? And so under resting conditions, glucagon is what is helping maintain blood glucose levels. However, it changes a little bit during exercise. So when we first start to exercise, we actually do release more glucagon during the first kind of that onset. But after that onset, it starts to be these other hormones like epinephrine and norepinephrine. If we go back to this figure here, you can see that with the yellow, we've got epinephrine, basically continuous increase. Norepinephrine's kind of the same, although it plateaus after about an hour. And then we've got cortisol, which really takes about 15 minutes to kick in. Okay, and so really 15 to 30 minutes, don't have any changes in cortisol. And what this does is this causes protein catabolism, okay, which is the breakdown of protein. So this is also a method that we can have gluconeogenesis. Now, as I said a minute ago, epi and norepi, the concentration continually increases as the duration of exercise increases, as well as the intensity. The harder you work out, or the more intense the activity you're doing, you're going to have more epi and more norepi. And these hormones cause glycogenolysis in both the liver and the muscle. Now, some of you are probably thinking, wait, I thought insulin was involved. Insulin is involved. But it doesn't really maintain blood glucose. It actually causes a decrease of blood glucose. Okay? And so what happens is it activates these receptors on the cell membrane of muscle called GLUT4 receptors and glucose transport. And there's several different types, but this is the main one that insulin does. And really, to think about it, it's just a door. So insulin is a key that will open these doors up that glucose can go through. Okay. This also, insulin also causes the formation of glycogen, right? And so, or it allows this to happen. So insulin will open these doors not only on muscle but in the liver as well. And so the liver is where we take glucose molecules, excess glucose molecules, we stick them together, and then we store them, and that's glycogenesis. And so we reduce that gluconeogenesis. We don't want blood sugar to be too high. We don't want it to be too low. So if blood sugar is high, we're going to stop. We want to inhibit. We want to have a negative feedback loop on the formation of new glucose. And so, simply put, insulin opposes glucagon. So when it comes to glucose uptake, insulin helps with that. But what's really interesting and super important is that exercise also promotes glucose uptake. Okay, glucagon concentration increases, insulin concentration decreases. But if you think about it, we need more glucose when we're exercising, right? Because we need to produce more ATP. So how does this work? Well, we believe that what happens is exercise decreases insulin sensitivity. Or in other words, I need less insulin to cause the same result. Okay? And so exercise kind of reduces how much insulin we need to open those doors. And this is a good thing because too much insulin can cause problems. Exercise is very beneficial for people that are diabetic, that have for insulin resistance, that sort of thing. And with that being said, we're going to stop talking about carbohydrate metabolism.